Your Excellencies, guests, and the large audience that is joining us virtually, welcome to today's critical convening, a new chapter in Afghanistan, ensuring international cooperation in support of Afghan women and girls. I'm Elan Verveer, and I direct the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace, and Security, and I'm pleased to be with you today to moderate this event, which is co-sponsored by the United Kingdom, Qatar, and Canada's permanent missions to the United Nations, as well as UN Women. We thank you all, and particularly those who are joining us here, but also those many who are joining us from around the world virtually. We come together at a dire time for Afghanistan, which faces an unprecedented humanitarian and human rights crisis with very grave consequences for Afghans, women, and girls. Only months ago, they were leading their country as government officials, parliamentarians, judges, ministers, ambassadors, business leaders, and in so many other capacities, civil society activists, journalists, artists, and students. And today, many of them are at great risk. Many are in hiding, living in fear. Others have been forced to leave the country they love. They do, however, continue to lead, as they always have, whether delivering emergency assistance in this moment or advocating with world leaders on behalf of the Afghan people. And several are here doing that today with us. It is critical for the international community to come together, not just with our powerful words of commitment, as important as they are, but with strong actions to address the urgency of the moment and to work to ensure the centrality of Afghan women in the decisions affecting all aspects of their country going forward, and for the protection of their rights, which should be non-negotiable. Let me turn now to Lord Ahmed of Wimbledon of the United Kingdom. He is the Minister of State for South Asia and the Commonwealth, and the Prime Minister's Special Representative on Sexual Violence and Conflict. Lord Ahmed, it is great to have you with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. And may I say, Ambassador, it's lovely seeing you again. Melanie, always good to connect. And my thanks also to Ambassador Thani. Assalamu alaikum, and good afternoon to you, Ambassador Ali. It's always a pleasure, and then you yourself are an example of the importance of the empowerment of women across the Islamic world. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of God, gracious, most merciful. Assalamu alaikum. Peace and blessings of God be upon everyone, and good afternoon. It's an immense pleasure, but also a great honor to be attending this event and representing my country, the United Kingdom. And we are both honored, but equally delighted to be sponsoring such an important event at this equally important time. As we've heard from Melanie already about what has happened over recent weeks in Afghanistan is something which has captured, rightly so, the attention of the world. And we have in this room some incredible and phenomenal speakers and women who we will hear from in a moment or two. And it is to them that we are really humbled to be in your presence and in your company this afternoon. As the international community comes together, it is undoubtedly true, as we discussed this morning at the UN Security Council, that we need to work together. We need to work urgently, not just to protect women and girls in Afghanistan, but to strengthen their rights in Afghanistan, and ultimately, with the Taliban, to hold them to account on their words and for their actions. When we reflect on modern-day Afghanistan that was until a few weeks ago, there were challenges, undoubtedly, but there was real progress that had been made over the last 2 decades. More girls being educated, more women in leadership roles, more civil society groups speaking out, standing up, rightly so, for the rights of others, and important progress on addressing issues of improving infant and maternal health. And these are positive gains, and we need not only to protect them, but ensure we sustain them, and indeed, one hopes, God willing, strengthen them. But that can only happen through international engagement and cooperation, and it is now vital that we act to protect these gains. Women and girls across Afghanistan deserve equality. They have the right to live safely, in security, and with dignity. Last night, I had the huge privilege of meeting women leaders from across Afghanistan, and many are present here this afternoon. There are many words I could express, but I know I reflected on our meeting with our ambassador, Dame Barbara Woodward, afterwards. And the two words that come to mind from all of us to you is thank you. Thank you for what you have done. Thank you for what you are doing. And we assure you of our solidarity in what you are continuing to do today. All of you, as you recounted to me, and many of you I've known over many years, escaped the dangers of the Afghanistan of today, the Afghanistan under the rule of the Taliban. From our perspective, the United Kingdom government continues to prioritize the protection of women, human rights defenders, and peace builders. In the UK, as some of you may know, we have set up a special Afghan citizens resettlement scheme, the ACRS, which will protect those who assisted the United Kingdom during our time as part of the NATO mission in Afghanistan, which stood up, those people who stood up for the values of democracy, for women's rights, freedom of speech, and the rule of law, as well as many vulnerable groups, including many religious minorities. The United Kingdom has already committed to welcome over 5,000 people in the first year of this scheme, and up to 20,000 over the coming years. But we are also working, importantly, in support of those who will remain in Afghanistan. People talk of those who are leaving, but it should never be forgotten, and we were reminded of this last night over the very valuable discussions and exchanges we had, that Afghanistan is a country diverse in its people of over 36 million people, and we should never turn our backs on them. It is therefore absolutely imperative that the international community, and by definition the United Nations, has a key role. And I'm delighted that I'm sitting next to the new Executive Director of UN Women, to ensure that we prioritize an inclusive and generous approach, both, yes, in the immediate term when it comes to humanitarian issues, but equally advocate and hold the Taliban to account to ensure inclusive governance. Women, men, different communities, faiths should all rightly be equal citizens of Afghanistan. It's also important that we stand by our words through direct financial support. The United Kingdom government has doubled aid to Afghanistan this year to £286 million, one of our largest programs across the world. This means our total aid contribution to the country since 2001 is now standing at around £3.5 billion. But the key question, and it is right to ask, that is all very well, but what next? Well, if the Taliban want international acceptance, it's not just about having to, they must uphold their international obligations, very much encompassed in the UN resolution that was passed by the UN Security Council without opposition, and that includes their obligations from the Taliban to include safe passage for those Afghans wishing to leave Afghanistan, to ensure unhindered passage for humanitarian aid, to ensure Afghanistan doesn't once again become a base for terrorism, and importantly, protecting the rights of all its citizens, and protecting, importantly, the rights of women and girls. The UN Security Council has this key role in holding the Taliban to account. And let me assure you of this. The United Kingdom will work with our partners. We will work with the UN to ensure that we take a firm stance in support of all these issues in Afghanistan. The issues of human rights is extremely important. And neighboring countries to Afghanistan also have a key role to play in using their support and influence. And if I may, right from the outset, acknowledge the constructive and important role through you, Madam Ambassador, that Qatar has played, both during the critical evacuation process and beyond, and continues to do to this day. The strong sense of friendship and cooperation between the United Kingdom and Qatar is demonstrated by the cooperation we have seen at this most challenging of times. But humanitarian aid and safe passage, as I've already said, must be prioritized immediately. Therefore, we call on all our allies and partners to work with us to ensure that everyone across Afghanistan, particularly minorities and especially women and girls, can access the healthcare they need, can access the education they need, and yes, ensure that they can access the jobs that they wish to undertake. And to champion our call for women to participate in public life and decision-making in a meaningful way, right at the heart of government. And there are many in this room who have been doing exactly that over many years. Afghanistan deserves an inclusive government that represents the country's rich diversities of communities, its rich diversity of all its people, and yes, the rich diversity of the many talents across all professions of its women. Islamic leaders too, in my view, have a pivotal role to play. And we urge them to highlight the positive contributions of women to their own societies and economies. And we encourage Islamic leaders to challenge the Taliban's interpretation of Islam. So let me address the Taliban quite directly. Islam provides for women's rights. It does not deny it. Islam provides for education for all, not just for boys, but for girls. Islam talks of empowerment of all communities, protection of minorities, not the suppression of them. For was it not the holy prophet of Islam, Prophet Muhammad, on whom be peace, who said from cradle to grave, every individual should thirst knowledge. He made it incumbent on every Muslim to seek education. There were no caveats, there were no limitations. This was an instruction for all. So I say to the Taliban once again, do you follow that Islam? That is the question. And it is there that the neighboring countries, particularly those who follow Islam, must also step forward and challenge them on that very basis. And let me assure you, that doesn't mean that we step back, we, the United Kingdom, but we want to work with countries. We want to work alongside these countries to ensure that we all collectively champion the rights of all communities across Afghanistan, of women and men across Afghanistan, for all generations of Afghanistan, both boys and girls. By acting and working together, I believe absolutely passionately that we will achieve our aims, but it requires collective action. And together we must push the Taliban to do exactly that. Stand true to the words you have spoken. Stand true to ensuring that you uphold the rights of women and girls across Afghanistan. And for us, the international community, we must not give up until those rights are secured. It is now for the Taliban. Are you going to take that decision to revive the spirit of Hazrat Khadija? Are you going to revive the spirit and leadership we saw of Hazrat Aisha? Or are you going to deny that right? And if you deny it, you are not in any way reflecting the virtues of the religion you claim to follow. I am hopeful, God willing, inshallah, that working together, we will achieve these aims. It will not be easy, and there are many across this room who know far, far better than I about the challenges on the ground. But one thing I can say is that the United Kingdom has been committed to Afghanistan, and I hope through some of the detail I've provided remain committed to Afghanistan, to ensure all citizens, irrespective of their religion or faith, but all citizens, irrespective of whether they're a man or a woman, a girl or a boy, that the international community does not turn its back and continues to stand by the people of Afghanistan. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Lord Ahmed, for that very powerful, comprehensive, and compelling call to action. We're going to turn now to Her Excellency Aliya bint Ahmad Al Thani, the permanent representative of Qatar to the United Nations. Madam Ambassador.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Melanie. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here on a very timely event. And let me begin by thanking His Excellency Lord Ahmed of Wimbledon for such an inspirational statement. Dear colleagues, I'm so delighted, of course, to be part of this event where we are convening together with the United Kingdom and Canada, and of course with UN Women and Georgetown Institute on Women, Peace and Security. Let me focus my statement on a couple of critical points. The state of Qatar maintains a strong policy focus on women's rights in Afghanistan. Women's empowerment is needed for peace and security and economic progress. Of course, due to our well-known mediation effort, in our conversations with the interim government and the Taliban leaders, the state of Qatar is stressing that Islam supports the right of both men and women to work and learn. We have to remember that 48.7% of Afghanistan's population are women. Therefore, empowering women is smart economics and critical for the sustainable socio-economic development. We are concerned that Afghanistan faces a dire economic situation and severe humanitarian challenges as winter approaches. Unfortunately, women and children are suffering and will suffer the most. Humanitarian aid should be independent from the political track. Afghan women and children deserve to be supported, and this requires engagement with the interim government. We have impressed upon the interim government the need to cooperate with the international community, including the United Nations. It's their responsibility as the governing body in the country. The state of Qatar is committed to continue to help in the evacuation efforts, provide humanitarian aid, medical support in coordination with international partners and relevant United Nations agencies and departments. Qatari technical teams have been working on the ground in Kabul to make sure the airport is in order and is able to allow delivery of humanitarian aid and allow movement of people, as well as working to establish safe corridors to deliver urgent aid. Our goal should be to unite Afghanistan and promote a comprehensive political settlement that is inclusive of all sectors of the Afghan society and acceptable to all. We believe this is the only way forward to a durable peace and the only way to protect women's rights. An unstable Afghanistan could lead to terrorism, a refugee crisis, an increased drug and human trafficking situation, to name few, which could destabilize the whole region. A peaceful Afghanistan is therefore key for stability in the region. Regional cooperation can play a substantial role in promoting economic growth and stability in Afghanistan and the region at large. Therefore, it is crucial that the international community remains engaged in Afghanistan. These are extremely important negotiation points that could be used to promote women's participation in public and political participation, including the right to access to education. Let me reiterate that from the outset, the state of Qatar has called for the preserving of the gains made over the last 20 years when it comes to the promotion and protection of women's rights, especially for women and girls. We have emphasized that excluding girls from schools and universities cannot be accepted. Women's rights are a cornerstone in Islamic heritage, as very much eloquently said by His Excellency Lord Ahmed of Wimbledon. There are countless examples of women who were active in Islamic society, in politics and education, who shaped the history of Islamic civilization. These facts have to be highlighted, as they might help the new leaders in Afghanistan understand that the inclusion of women is not against Islamic teaching and practice. We have called on the transitional government to take examples from many Islamic countries, including the state of Qatar, in which women exercise their rights fully and constructively. I will stop here, and I would like to conclude by saying that the process of change does not occur from one day to the other. It takes engagement, collaboration, and assistance, and gradually steer it in the right direction. Abandoning Afghanistan and the Afghan people and women and girls in Afghanistan is not an option for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. And we're going to turn now to Her Excellency Jacqueline O'Neill, who is Canada's Ambassador for Women, Peace and Security. Ambassador O'Neill.
Thank you. Merci, Ambassador Verveer, and to colleagues here in New York City and joining from all around the world. It is an honor for Canada to be part of this event, to join the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace and Security, UN Women, Qatar, who we also thank for your close cooperation with Canadians in ensuring the safety of our people. And for the United Kingdom, we thank both Qatar and the United Kingdom for your leadership in keeping the issue of Afghan women and girls a priority here in New York, including and led by Ambassador Zaltani and Ambassador Woodward. So thank you. I'm deeply aware that my calculations for participating today were much different than for some other speakers. I did not have to think twice about having my name appear on this invitation or speaking with the video camera turned on in a recorded event. I'm not afraid that because of what I say, my family might face retaliation. We cannot take for granted that the speakers from whom we are about to hear have faced risks of literally showing up for these conversations. And Canada is grateful to each of you. We are grateful to Afghan women around the world, fighting this fight from wherever they are and trying at the same time to navigate starting a new chapter with their own families. And we are grateful to Afghan women and girls and their male champions who are in Afghanistan, struggling to hold on to hard-fought gains. And even in this struggle, and even with this determination to keep going, it's clear to us that for many Afghan women, there is a new cynicism, a disillusionment with members of the international community, and for many, almost a new lens on everything that we say and do. And for so many, our actions represent a litmus test on commitments related to feminist foreign policies, women, peace and security, and more. And indeed, around the world, people are watching. Promoting and protecting human rights with a focus on women and girls has been a priority for Canada's engagement in Afghanistan, and this will not change. Canada is acutely aware that for all of us who are supporters of the rights of Afghan women and girls, for us to have an impact, we must coordinate, the theme of today's event. We'd humbly suggest that our efforts must have at least 4 characteristics. First, they must be informed continuously by diverse Afghan women. We have to listen and listen and listen some more. And we must be serious about the resources it takes to get the representative input to which we need to listen. Second, we must deliver consistent messages to the Taliban on women's rights. We'll hear more today about what those messages should be, but Afghan women have already been vocal on several priorities, including the importance of getting needed humanitarian assistance to the people of Afghanistan, to make sure that women are full participants in every aspect of designing, planning, delivering, and receiving, with unrestricted access to every part of the country, humanitarian assistance. Afghan women have been clear about the importance of being able to go to school safely and at all levels, and to go to work, and to fulfill the roles that they want to play to sustain their families and their economy. And Afghan women have been crystal clear about how essential it is to all of our interests and values that women participate fully and meaningfully in decisions about every issue of importance to Afghanistan's peace and security. Of course, there are many more, but we must note that these top-line consistent messages should not be controversial. None go beyond what we've already agreed to previously. We have 10 United Nations Security Council resolutions on women, peace, and security. We have a UN convention on the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, a UN declaration on human rights. These are all principles to which we have already agreed. Third, our coordinated efforts must include a broad range of countries, including others in the region and those with majority Muslim populations. And finally, and by no means least, we must include women in our own delegations and teams, including at the most senior levels. I'll end here so that we can hear from our Afghan colleagues and listen and listen and listen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador O'Neill. And we will indeed now turn to the Afghan colleagues with us here in the room, women leaders who have joined us. And we are indeed very grateful to you for all that you do, for being with us, for your example of courage, commitment, and leadership. Your voices matter greatly, and indeed, as the ambassador just said, we are here to listen to you. I have known most of you over many, many years and greatly admired your work. Like all of us in this room, we hope for better days ahead, and in the meantime, we will do the work that is before us. We will begin by listening to Fawzia Koofi, former member of the Afghan Parliament, Vice President of the National Assembly, and member of the negotiation team of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. Fawzia, I hope that you will speak some to the unfolding humanitarian crisis and its consequences, as well as the consequences of aid conditionality, which is a big issue that many are grappling with, particularly the consequences for women and girls. How can the international community ensure that aid is delivered to those most in need, those at grave risk, without legitimizing the Taliban? Fawzia, thank you for being here.
I hope it's okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Ambassador Verveer, Brother Lord Ahmad, Ambassador O'Neill, Ambassador Al-Thani, my sister, the Executive Director of UN Women, my sisters from Afghanistan, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to the women of Afghanistan. A woman that are talked about a lot, but listened to very little. Ambassador Verveer, honestly, a year ago, I was thinking that I was dreaming that one day I will come to this beautiful, prestigious building, one day, and I speak as President of Afghanistan. With me, thousands and millions of girls and women in Afghanistan had this dream that now they think will never come true. It's heartbreaking. This morning, the Security Council had open debate on women, peace, and security. They did not use the opportunity of listening to the women of Afghanistan, a group that has been victim, but yet in the full front of protecting the world's security. You missed that opportunity. You talked about women's rights, about Afghanistan, but you did not listen to us. Ambassador, as I speak here today to you, in my country, the women and men who dedicated their lives to building peace, to promoting the rule of law and justice and equality, people who put their own lives to protect and serve our communities, from community to civil society, from peace builders to our judges, journalists, musicians, security officers, are in hiding. Some are being hunted, others have already been hunted. In 2019, the UN Security Council adopted a resolution calling for the protection of peace builders in conflict-affected settings. And yet, here we are, as Ambassador O'Neill mentioned, 10 resolutions, and 21 years since the adoption of Resolution 1325. Day by day, women are becoming invisible. Our voices are erased. Inclusion is being replaced with exclusionary politics. In my country, Afghanistan, the de facto power, Taliban, they have said all Afghans must be safe in our country. But yet, the reality is that women and every citizen, religious minorities, are facing catastrophe. The religious minorities are forced for displacement. Women are basically erased from public and social life. I ask you, all of you, why is this happening in my country? For years, why did the international community refuse our request for a multi-stakeholders peace process? And why more necessary time was not given to the peace process to result what we wanted? Our conflict is multi-dimensional, and peace efforts could take longer. Instead, we and the parties, under time pressure, expedited war. And now my people pay the consequences. The Taliban asks you for patience, but you as the international community must seek concrete actions from them too. The institutions and our states are meant to prevent and scourge the people. They are meant to promote human security, at minimum, the freedoms from want and fear. You are meant to uphold the principles of responsibility to protect civilians. Yet, the reality in my country is the opposite. Our women and men, our children, a country with over 40% population under 14 years of age are facing profound fear and want. As the responsibility to protect, where is it? Let's be clear. In Afghanistan, if Afghanistan is a safe and prosperous place for its citizens, none of us would be seeking refuge outside the country. We love our land. We are proud of our culture and heritage. We all strive for our children to have a safe and dignified life, just as you all do. So it's on this note, imagine what would you want for your own children? Would you want the same future for them? Certainly no. Ambassador Verveer, you asked about the humanitarian aid. The humanitarian crisis is looming. Women and children constitute the majority of our population. To reach them, especially given the gender discriminative ideology of Taliban, it is imperative that the UN demand the protection and inclusion of Afghan women in every stage of aid and humanitarian aid distribution, from planning to implementation and being the recipients. Women and minorities in Afghanistan, as Brother Lord Ahmed said, it's a country of diversity. They are the critical for a proper, transparent distribution of aid. This is entirely up to all of us, up to the United Nations, to control it. The UN OCHA and other agencies must demonstrate a practical and clear gender-responsive aid plan. And on that note, they need to listen and include women in the process of planning. We are hearing that there is going to be a trust fund created by UNDP and World Bank, and we only heard it when we were in New York. Can you imagine about those voiceless women who do not have a telephone to reach any service? What will they know about what will reach to them? So it's important that women are not only listened to, but their views are taken serious, because women participation is not a matter of political and social issue, but it's rather a matter of national security in our countries. I know that geopolitics in the region now plays important role in shaping people of Afghanistan's future. New emerging powers, conflicting interests in the region is making us more and more vulnerable. I urge all member states, especially the neighboring countries, and in large the Muslim countries, to stand in solidarity with people of Afghanistan. The response to military extremism that could be risk to any nation is only supporting the transformed population in Afghanistan. You cannot defeat one military extremist with another military extremist group. You can only defeat a military extremist group by supporting those women and men who are in the defenseless, but yet courageous, in the streets of Kabul, asking for their rights, accepting enormous challenges. The Taliban bullet being pointed at their chest, but they still ask for their rights. That is empowerment of that nation, is the response to military extremism in the region. Finally, the Taliban has asked for the world to be patient as it takes charge. The Taliban want your trust, your recognition. You have issued statements believing in their reassurances. Well, why not ask them to demonstrate their commitment to peace through their actions? Ask them to form a meaningfully inclusive government, respect rights and liberties of people, and bring constitutional order so that everyone have the right to use their votes. Ask them to stop torturing journalists. Even today, when there was a protest, probably you have seen the footages. Journalists were beaten, threatened. Every day, that's the life of people. And ask them to stop searching people's home and threatening them, and ask them to take on the responsibility to protect and respect all Afghans, regardless of their age or sex or ethnicity. If they can take care of Afghanistan as much as we do, they need to be tolerance and acceptance. Let them show it by preserving our culture and respecting our people. So, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, tell me, please, are you with us in this fight? Will you act now? I hope so. I urge you to do so, to be on the right side of the history, and in being so and acting, you can look back and say that you did something that gave hope to millions of Afghans, to their country and to their future. Thank you.
Thank you, Fawzia, so much. And we hear you, and you have said very explicitly, made a demand on the United Nations to please ensure the full participation of women at every stage of the assistance going forward, from the planning, which you so eloquently underscored as well. And I don't think any of us wants to allow the women of Afghanistan to become invisible and for exclusion to replace inclusion. So thank you for your statement and for being with us. We're going to turn now to Nahid Farid, who is a former member of the Afghan Parliament and chairperson of the House Standing Committee for Human Rights, Civil Society, and Women's Affairs. Nahid, thank you too for being here, and hopefully you can, excuse me, discuss the current and worsening human rights and women's rights situation in Afghanistan. How can we monitor what is happening? How can the international community hold the Taliban accountable for violations of international human rights laws?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, Ambassador Verveer, ambassadors, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's my true pleasure and honor to speaking to you today. Thank you for posing such an important question. To give you an analysis of the current human rights situation in Afghanistan, I want to start with the fact that when the Taliban took control of Kabul, they said all the right things. First, they ensured that they have no problem with girls' education, and women should resume their jobs, and there is no prohibition of women's freedom. Second, they also highlighted that they will establish an inclusive government based on the national consensus, and they will start consultation right away. Third, they also promised that they will give general amnesty to all who fought against them and also opposed them in the past. They were smart enough to say that because they know that international community was watching them. But unfortunately, it took few days until they deny all their promises, and their commitment did not translate into action. And instead of doing all those right things, they did all the wrong things. Today marks the 34th day that Afghan girls banned from attending secondary school. Extrajudiciary killings, public executions, ethnic cleansing, molestations, mass killings takes place in Afghanistan as we speak. I want to translate women's rights situation in Afghanistan, a gender apartheid. Taliban restricting all means of freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of media. Prisons are empty. And all those convicted Taliban and criminals are looking for attorneys and judges that put them in the jail. Economic collapse is obvious, and it's a human rights aspect because if it happens, it will collapse on the shoulders of women of Afghanistan. The de facto Taliban structure on the ground is all male, all Taliban structure. If it looks like from a woman perspective, a women of Afghanistan perspective, and from a broader scope, the reason they took their initial promises back might be because these restrictions on human rights and forming a highly fragmented government is that it was a catalyst and tool that can keep their foot soldiers united and integrated and in line with them. How can women's rights be monitored? How can human rights be monitored? How can international community hold the Taliban accountable for the violation of human rights and human rights laws? In fact, there is no data and data collection system. There's no fact-checking, no verification mechanism on the ground to report human rights status of Afghanistan. Civil society advocates are not allowed to do what they are supposed to do in Afghanistan. And unfortunately, we witnessed that after the fall of Afghanistan, Human Rights Council in Geneva proposed the agenda to establish independent human rights mechanism to surveillance mechanisms for Afghan current human rights crisis. But unfortunately, it was opposed by China and by Russia based on the fact, beside other leverages, such as conditionalized humanitarian assistance or conditionalized talking over Taliban legitimacy, we proposed the establishment of an independent, impartial, investigative, and monitoring mechanism urgently and immediately within United Nations structure to hold Taliban accountable of their actions. Because in the absence of a strong, independent human rights monitoring mechanism in Afghanistan, to document, to verify, to register violations, the systematic violence will be intensified, and it becomes a norm, it becomes a culture, and women and people of Afghanistan and minorities will suffer from that. At the end, We want your solidarity. We want the world's solidarity with actionable, concrete decisions about Afghanistan current situation. People of Afghanistan deserve to live in dignity, deserve to live in liberty and freedom and prosperity, but they are living under Taliban, the same group that was portrayed to them by world as terrorists. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nahid, and for your eloquent statement about why we need an international human rights monitoring mechanism and what's at stake and why actions speak louder than words. We've been hearing a lot of platitudes from the Taliban about how they're going to conduct themselves, and we've seen nothing but the opposite, human rights violations, to be sure. We're going to turn now to Anisa Shahid. She's been a journalist with Tolo News. She will be speaking in Dari, and it will be consecutively translated. Anisa, given your life's work as a journalist, perhaps you can tell us some about the role of media and freedom of expression and what is happening in Afghanistan. Again, the challenge, the need for verification. Without today having an Afghan Human Rights Commission, what vehicles will there be? And the role, as you see it, of the international community in addressing the need for accountability and mechanisms for verification. Thank you for being here.
تشکر از وقتتان، تشکر از این برنامه و تشکر از این که چانس دادین پس از 2 ماه روزهای سخت چند نفر از افغانستان، چند نفر زنی که به می تازگی در می وضعیت بعد از افغانستان بیرون شدن در مورد مردم افغانستان گپ بزنن.
Thank you very much for this program. Thank you very much for this opportunity. It is an honor to be here. Thank you very much for giving us the platform and the opportunity to hear from the Afghan women on these issues.
یک جامعه با 4 بخشش اداره میشه و با این 4 بخش است که تکمیل میشه و مردم میتونن یک زندگی بهتر در اونجا داشته باشن.
In a community, for a community to sustain and to move forward, there are 4 sections in order for that community to strive and to move forward.
در پهلوی نهادهای قواهای قضاییه و اجراییه و مقننه کلانترین قدرت رسانه ها هستند در یک جامعه. اما امروز ما رسانه آزاد در افغانستان نداریم.
In order to take the legislative, judicial, and the executive branch responsible, you need the media. Legislative, executive, and judicial, and also a freedom of media or press. You need these to hold the government accountable.
امروز رسانه آزاد در افغانستان نیست و خبرنگار مسلکی کمتر در افغانستان وجود داره تا وضعیت افغانستان را، چیزی که در افغانستان میگذره، مستندسازی کنه تا او را جهان ببینه.
Currently, thus far, right now, there's no freedom of press. There are no competent journalists for them to be able to gather information, to verify information, and to present that information on the current events of Afghanistan.
20 سال برای آزادی بیان، حقوق بشر و دموکراسی تلاش شد. 20 سال سرمایه گذاری شد و 20 سال کار شد. اما 2 ماه پیش تمام از این نابود شد.
The international community worked very hard to achieve, for the past 20 years, to achieve freedom of press. They invested, they worked very hard. Again, 20 years of all work and sweat, all deteriorated in a matter of 2 months.
بسیاری رسانه ها بسته شدند. مردم بیکار شد. زنها خانه نشین شدند. و حتی کودک افغانستان از آموزش باز ماند و اجازه درس خواندن نداره.
Majority of media outlets closed down. Women remained home, or they were placed at home. Children were taken away from their education right. And the children were deprived of education.
حق درس خواندن از کودک‌ها گرفته شده و خبرنگارای مسلکی افغانستان مجبور شدن ترک کنن. همگی تبعید شدند.
The right of children has been taken away in terms of their education. That has been taken away, and also competent journalists are not there to report on the activities.
امروز وقت زنها برای حق خود، برای به دست آوردن حقشان به سرکا میبراین و مظاهره میکنن. طالبا با خشونت میخواین این مظاهری از اینا را خاموش بسازن. صدایشان را میخواین خاموش بسازن.
Today, the women's right, they're given right to go and protest. But what the Taliban are doing to confront them, they're actually faced with violence. They're innate freedom to go and protest, but the Taliban are protesting them and they're abused physically.
و وقتی که رسانه ها و خبرنگارا به محل میرن ثبت کنن چیزی را که در افغانستان میگذره، طالب با خشونت با خبرنگار لطکوب میکنه، خبرنگار زندانی میسازه.
When the press goes to do their to perform their duties and perform reporting, they're confronted with violence by the Taliban, and in some cases they're actually jailed and beaten too.
زنایی را که در جاده ها برآمدن مظاهره کردند، طالبان زندانی ساختند برای ساعتها. با شلاق زدند. خبرنگارا را لطکوب کردند که حتی احتمال معلول شدنشان وجود داره.
The women that came out and protest, majority of them were confronted with violence, and some of them were jailed for hours too. And journalists that actually went and report on the incidents of atrocities, some of them were beaten, and some of them were actually their whereabouts are unknown.
و تمام این وضعیت به خاطری شده که جهان مردم افغانستان را برشان بار گفت که طالبان تغییر کردند. شما با طالبان گفتگو کنین و اجازه بدین که طالب شریک قدرت شوه. این حالت در حالی صورت میگیره، در وضعیتی ما قرار داریم که طالب همه جهان میگفت طالبان تغییر کردند، اما ما میبینیم که طالب تغییر نکرده و امروز حقوق مردم افغانستان نقض میشه.
This condition occurred or came about because the whole world was saying that the Taliban have changed. The Talibans have changed and they have changed their ways of doing what they were doing. But in reality, they haven't. They are the same Taliban.
آمریکایی‌ها و غربی‌ها میتونستند که روی وضعیت سیاسی افغانستان تاثیر مثبت داشته باشند، اما متاسفانه اعتمادی که نسبت به طالب شد و حمایتی که از طالبان صورت گرفت، نتیجه چیزی است که امروز جهان میبینه.
The Americans and the Western nations had an influence to amend the political system in Afghanistan. However, the trust that they had on them.
مردم افغانستان حقوقشان نقض میشه امروز، اما جهان برای تغییر وضعیت سیاسی افغانستان پلان یا برنامه نداره. 4 روز است که ما اینجا گفتگو میکنیم با مقامات مختلف، اما امیدواری زیادی دیده نمیشه که وضعیت سیاسی افغانستان تغییر کنه.
Afghans' human rights are being stripped and taken away, but I do not see a clear plan in a clear strategic manner where what the international community is planning or and having in works. And I have been here for 4 days. I've been hearing, And I slightly get hopeless from what I've been hearing that there's lots of talking but lack of actions.
چیزی که در افغانستان امروز جریان داره، چیزی را که مردم افغانستان امروز شاهدش هستن، فقط مردم بیرون از افغانستان میتونن اون را در فیلم ها ببینن. وحشتی که در اونجا جریان داره، اما کسی نیست که بتونه مستندسازی کنه و همه چیزی را که اتفاقی را در افغانستان رخ میده به بیرون نشان بده.
What we're witnessing from the outside, what's happening in Afghanistan, we can only witness it via films, via other media outlets. There is no in-ground journalist or press to gather information and to report on the ground what's happening. The atrocities that's occurring, that's not being reported.
همه کشورها تعهد داشتن بر از که اجازه نمیتن نظام افغانستان سقوط کنه، اما نظام سقوط کرد. حالا توقعی است که برای تغییر وضعیت کمک شوه و مردم افغانستان از این بدبختی نجات پیدا کنن.
The international community had made a commitment that the Afghanistan's system, governance system, was not going to collapse. However, it wasn't the case. The system did indeed collapse, and we're asking to help us in helping us change the political situation in Afghanistan.
آیا شما فکر میکنین که آمریکایی‌ها مأموریتشون را تکمیل کردند در افغانستان یا تعهدی را که اروپاییان بر افغانستان داشتند به او پابند بودند؟
I'm inquiring whether the Americans did they complete their affairs, or the European Union, the commitment that they had obliged or had committed, did they complete those commitments?
امروز افغانستان به مرکز گروه‌های تروریستی مبادل شده.
Afghanistan has turned into the epicenter of terrorism now.
داعش، القاعده، حقانی، طالب و نزدیک 20 گروه تروریستی دیگه در افغانستان فعالیت میکنن.
Right now in Afghanistan, more than 20 other terrorism groups operate. Daesh, Haqqani, Taliban.
آیا شما اجازه میتین که افغانستان مرکز تروریسم جهان شود؟ آیا این تهدید بر منطقه و جهان نیست؟
Do you allow Afghanistan to become the epicenter of terrorism or a ground for terrorism to partake and to become a threat to the international community?
توقع داریم که در برابر آنچه در افغانستان جریان داره جهان خاموش نباشه. تشکر.
My hope and expectation is what's happening in Afghanistan for the world to not turn their back and not be silenced on what's happening on the current situation in Afghanistan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nahid. Anisa. Just reminding us of those demonstrations that we've all been witnessing in some way or reading about, and the fact that you as a journalist and your colleagues have been punished for just reporting on them, and how difficult it is going to be if there is no way to hold these actions accountable, and how important that is going forward. And your message to us that you still haven't seen evidenced that we have our acts together in some way as to how to develop that kind of monitoring and accountability mechanism. So thank you, and we feel too the difficulty of what it's represented for you as a journalist to now see what's happening. We're going to turn now to Asila Wardak, who is a diplomat, former diplomat. And Asila, perhaps you could talk about the economic crisis and its impact on women and girls, and how resources might be delivered to them, particularly to organizations that could help deal with the economic crisis. How do we get resources to civil society, for example?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for UN Women for facilitating space for Afghan women to speak directly with senior UN officials and member states. I would like to also thanks to Qatar, UK, and Canada, and Georgetown Institute for facilitating this important high-level meetings. First of all, I would like to sincerely thank all those countries, USA, Qatar, UAE, I'm naming Canada, UK, or other neighbors, and also various European countries that helped evacuate Afghans. We will not forget your support. It's important to highlight that not all Afghan women leaders left Afghanistan, Madam Verveer. So many Afghans continued everyday struggle for their rights and freedom. Even if they are stopped by Taliban, they continue their work wherever they are. Kabul, region, provinces, neighborhood, everybody. Those outside the country, like myself, in raising our voices on women's and children's rights issues and concerns. Women leaders are not just raising the alarm bells on women's rights. We are also raising that our country is facing a dire humanitarian crisis. 18 million of Afghans are facing hunger. Instead of 3 times food, Afghans are having only 1 time on their table. And then they are waiting that from where they will receive two more meals. Our economy is almost collapsed. Women leaders are engaged in the most pressing issues facing our country. Women's leadership is critical for effective humanitarian delivery and assistance. Women are not just beneficiaries of aid. We are leaders that have expertise in a range of topics, including humanitarian assistance, its design, implementation, and economic development, human rights, and women's empowerment. I urge the international community to not please put any condition for humanitarian assistance. People, especially women and children, dying for a piece of bread. Winter is coming. Our voices in leadership are needed urgently to inform the design of humanitarian assistance. This is the only way to meet the unprecedented scale of humanitarian needs. Many women leaders now find themselves in the diaspora. This is not out of choice. We left Afghanistan for our safety and to continue our efforts. One thing that keeps us going is the solidarity and daily encouragement we receive from women leaders across the world. There is invisible power in solidarity. Women need support to connect and engage Afghan women from every corner of the world to those that are inside the country. We need platforms to give voice to the voiceless who are stuck in Afghanistan and cannot connect with the world. Women are a force inside and outside Afghanistan that will ultimately transform my country. The only way to tackle violence, extremism in Afghanistan and anywhere in the world is to transform the social fabrics of society to ensure that people can peacefully coexist and that all communities are heard and participate fully in their country. We call on the member states here today and other international community stakeholders like Georgetown Institute to support forums and dialogues for Afghan women. Also to support those Afghan women leaders who are in exile, to get official documents to allow them to move and then to continue their struggle and advocacy. We also need your support to create dialogue channels so that Afghan women can speak directly with the Taliban. We know that member states and UN are talking with Taliban. We have been told that women's rights are part of these discussions. My final message, please do not talk about me in these discussions. Create spaces for me and other Afghan women leaders to talk directly with the Taliban. This is how you meaningfully include women in peace process and peace and security process as well as humanitarian assistance projects. Give us a seat at the table. Do not put us into the corridor. My final remarks, I would like to extend my sincerely thanks especially to Ambassador Verveer for her long-standing support to women of Afghanistan. Your efforts are known. Afghan women know that we will have always a friend and support us. I would also like to thank Ambassador Verveer for her entire support for providing of fellowships and scholarships to Afghan women in diaspora. And I request other member states also to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Asila, and for underscoring the urgency and the need for inclusion, particularly now, more than ever. It's always been important. And now we will turn to end the presentations from our Afghan delegation to Miriam Safi, the founding director of the Organization for Policy Research Development Studies. Miriam, we've heard references to the need for regional cooperation. Perhaps you can underscore that in terms of why it matters also for women and girls going forward, how the regional states can play an important role in promoting security and human rights in Afghanistan. And how can we help, we in the international community, help so that the women can continue their work and remain a vital, visible force, not invisible, a vital, visible force in the days ahead under the constraints that we're all experiencing?
Thank you. Respected Chair, Ambassador Verveer, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for giving me the opportunity to address this forum today. One of the reasons why in Afghanistan we saw a triumphum of terrorism over democracy was because in the last 20 years, despite the efforts of Afghans, we weren't able to achieve two goals with regional countries. One, we weren't able to come to an agreement on one common definition of terrorism. Second, we weren't able to agree on a common approach to fighting terrorism. As the US was preparing to announce its timeline for the withdrawal of its troops, Afghanistan's neighbors were rapidly working towards securing their borders and building new alliances to ensure their geopolitical interests would be served through a friendly new structure in Afghanistan. We saw since the start of US-Taliban talks, visits by the Taliban to regional countries such as Russia, Iran, Pakistan, China, and others. We also had regional countries host intra-Afghan dialogues that at times they owned the agenda, the participants list, and absolutely no assurances of women's participation in those meetings, except for a few where we had one or two. Iran and Russia, responding positively upon the withdrawal of US forces, found themselves concerned about the security impact this could have at their doorsteps. Iran, concerns stemming from the flow of migrants, refugees, countering narcotics trafficking, maintaining cross-border trade, and mitigating threats from ISIS. Russia, too, worried about the security threats posed by ISIS, which we are seeing a sudden rise in across Afghanistan. For Central Asia, the concern that had long been held was the rise of a civil war that could turn Afghanistan into a hub for jihadist and criminal groups that could destabilize the progress so far made between South and Central Asia in terms of economic connectivity, trade, and transit. Now, Central Asian countries are looking to the Taliban to contain transnational violent extremist groups such as IMU and Al-Qaeda, securing their borders and providing safe passage of goods. China, who has often highlighted that stability in Afghanistan was of the highest importance and priority in the country, with the withdrawal, Beijing became concerned. They became concerned about a period of uncertainty that might ensue, pulling Afghanistan into a protracted conflict, a massive humanitarian crisis, and for Afghanistan to once again become the epicenter of transnational terrorism. China views US withdrawal with mixed feelings. It had hoped that upon leaving, they would leave behind a stable Afghanistan. Currently, Beijing is pursuing and accommodating with the de facto authorities in Kabul as it tries to ensure no trouble in Xinjiang, nor to its economic interests in Afghanistan that includes initiatives linked to the Belt and Road Initiative, the Five Nations Railway Initiative, fiber optics, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, and much more. Upon the takeover of Kabul, Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan said it wanted an inclusive political settlement in Afghanistan, which of course didn't take place. Pakistan officials praised the Taliban for averting major violence. And aside from these statements, there was also a sense of triumph in Pakistan that its policy of supporting the Taliban has indeed paid off. Taliban victory was also being seen by some as a win for Islamist ideology over liberal democratic values and the countries that promoted it. Prime Minister Imran Khan said Afghans were breaking the shackles of slavery, referring to the imposition of Western values on Afghanistan, the ones that Afghan women, men, and youth were dying from on the streets as they were protesting upon the transition of the Republic flag to the Islamic Emirate, to the women who were protesting on the streets for their human rights, the ones they enjoyed under the Republic, under our young democracy that just needed more time to take root. But others in Pakistan are worried about the security spillovers, the reemergence of Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. Leverages. In these concerns that these regional countries hold, I believe lies issues upon which the levers of leverage can be identified and used. Three overarching concerns among all these nations are insecurity, economic instability, the rise of Islamist and extremist groups in the region and spilling into their countries. Recognition, economic support, and I would also add here legitimacy, are all levers that these states could instrumentalize. They have more to lose from instability in Afghanistan than any other nation beyond. The recent Moscow conference, in which 10 regional countries committed to coordinating their humanitarian assistance and economic support through the Taliban, at a time when the Taliban have not implemented any of the commitments that they have so far made, is risky. As these commitments to economic support come without no benchmarks, no conditions whatsoever. It is critical for the international community to come onto the same page, use these leverages together that is at their disposal, being economic support and recognition, to set clear benchmarks for the Taliban and for their engagement with the Taliban. I would like to point out here that there's a fine line between engagement and recognition, and at times it seems that the international community is moving from one to the other. Coordinating the humanitarian response should also be one in which the international community as a whole does on the same page. If we don't do this, then there's no saying where the economic support, where the humanitarian assistance being given to the Taliban is being spent on, what it is feeding, and whether it is getting into the hands of those that need it the most. A last point that I'd like to end on, I believe it was 2.5 years ago, I was sitting where Ambassador O'Neill is sitting. I said to the members that the international community is relegating the voices of women to the margins while treating the Taliban as the locals giving them ownership of the process, while saying that women were posing as obstacles to a political settlement. It didn't go anywhere. No one heard. So I sit here again, without a home, without a country, and an end to what millions of Afghans sacrificed with their lives and their dreams. And I'm going to say to you that if engagement doesn't speak of benchmarks, it doesn't speak of tough conditions for the Taliban to put into action their words, the regression, the turmoil, and the insecurity we Afghans are facing today, they will face tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. I know that wasn't easy, and I remember vividly your statement 2 years ago. It was powerful then. It's even more powerful now in terms of what's happened and the need to have listened. And thank you for discussing with us the need for a regional engagement with the kind of benchmarks and conditions that do not promote the Taliban, but promote the needs and aspirations of the Afghan people. We're going to turn now. I hope we virtually have with us Her Excellency Mehdi Knudsen, the Deputy Special Representative for Afghanistan with UNAMA. Do we have her? It's very late in Afghanistan where she is. And hopefully...
Yes, I'm present.
Thank you so much. Please begin.
Yeah, Madam Chair, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to you. Can you not hear me? There seems to be a problem with the sound.
No, I think we can all hear. Please go forward.
You can hear, okay. Thank you very much. Madam Chair, Excellencies, my Afghan women colleagues, it's of course very emotional for us here in Kabul also to see you present there in New York. I think you all spoke very clearly and very clearly illustrated why it is so important to listen to the voice of Afghan women and to make sure that Afghan women are present in all on all occasions where discussions are being held on the future of Afghanistan. And I actually looked at the title of this event, Ensuring International Cooperation in Support of Afghan Women and Girls, and thought that maybe next time it should be ensuring international cooperation with Afghan women and girls in support of their rights, because it is very clear that we will only follow the right policies, get to the right solutions if we listen to the voice of Afghan women and girls. I don't think I need to go into a description of the situation in Afghanistan at the moment. We have heard that clearly from the panel. It is obvious that we have multiple crises that are coming together at the moment, humanitarian crisis, a financial and economic crisis, and a crisis also, of course, for the rights of women. So I think that what we observe also from the side of UNAMA is that one word that characterizes the present situation is uncertainty. I've had, together with the SRSG, Deborah Lyons, I've had a number of interactions over the last weeks with Afghan women present here in Kabul and also some of those that are outside Afghanistan. And I think the word that really characterizes also their description of their own situation is uncertainty. We have heard today about promises made by the Taliban, but also the lack of action on the ground. We also heard about the need to monitor developments on the ground, and I would say that this is something that we as UNAMA, as the UN system here in Afghanistan, see as one of our foremost duties and obligations to monitor what is happening on the ground and to feed what we observe into the dialogue we have with the de facto authorities, and also into the dialogue we have with the international community. I think it's clear that we see all of these challenges in terms of women's access to work, girls' access to education, but we do also observe, for example, now 6 provinces in Afghanistan where we see progress in terms of also girls' access to secondary education, secondary schools being open for girls. But we need to monitor if that also translates to girls actually being present in those schools. We hear about some ministries where female staff have been invited back to their jobs, but we need to monitor if that is actually translated into them being able to show up at work and also perform their duties. So I think that as the UN system here, we stress very much that we are here to observe, to monitor, and of course also to deliver the much needed humanitarian assistance that we have heard about here. And I want to stress that, of course, we also fully support what our Afghan colleagues have said today, that women need to be involved in all aspects of humanitarian delivery. Women need to be there to plan the humanitarian efforts. They need to be there to implement, and we need to make sure that women can access humanitarian services. This will benefit the women, but it will also benefit the whole population, and not least the children. I want to say maybe also a few words more about what I see as some of the efforts that we need to do as the UN system together with our Afghan colleagues. I think one issue that we need to focus on is the overall economic situation. We are talking a lot about the humanitarian situation and the need for humanitarian assistance, but I think it's important to stress that if we do not also deal with the broader economic and financial system and crisis, and with the crisis of liquidity in the economy, then we will have difficulties in delivering what we want with our humanitarian assistance. And I want to stress that when the economy breaks down, it's also the women that will be hurt by this. They are hurt, of course, at the moment by being prevented to access their jobs. They are they are hurt by the lack of payment of salaries to teachers, to health workers. They are hurt by problems in running their businesses, both because of the challenges they face from the Taliban authorities, but also from the enormous downturn that we see in economic activities. And I should stress that, just as an example, there are in Afghanistan 2 million widows. 2 million widows that do not have the possibility of relying on male support for gaining an income for themselves and their children, and we need to advocate for their access to work, to do their businesses. I want to stress, because it has been mentioned, that there's a lack of information on what goes on in the country. Of course, we are very much focused on the issue of the media houses. We are also in close contact with those media houses, journalists that are still in country, and trying to support them as best we can. But I would also stress that we are present as the UN system across the country, and we will do our best to monitor what takes place on the ground, the human rights situation, the situation of women, and we will continue to report on that and to involve you as the international community in stressing the need for the de facto authorities to uphold human rights. The Secretary General has clearly appealed to the international community to stand together, to speak with one voice, and to use all tools at its disposal to uphold the human rights in Afghanistan, and especially also for the women and girls. I think I should not take too much time, but apart from stressing this overall need for the focus on the economic situation, engaging on broader aspects of support for the Afghan economy, I want to stress especially for the women and girls, and something that has also been stressed now in the debate here from our Afghan colleagues, that we need to continue to support women's and girls' organizations, those that are still active within Afghanistan, those that are outside the country. There is an urgent need to make sure that these organizations are still funded, that women peace builders are supported, that women activists are supported, so that they can continue to be part of this the effort to promote the rights of women in Afghanistan. Let me end here, and thank you very much again for this opportunity to speak at this very, very important forum.
Thank you so much, Meti, and to your colleagues with UNAMA, and for all that you are doing, and for the guidance that you've provided to us today. And I guess we say good night to you now, because it's much later there. We're going to turn finally to our Executive Director of UN Women, and upon the conclusion of her remarks, we'll go into the interventions. And I'm very conscious that many of you have to leave in the next half hour or so. I'll turn to you now, Sima Sami Batrous.
Thank you, Melanie. I will be very brief. I would just like to thank the UK, Qatar, Canada, and the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace and Security for co-hosting this very timely event. But above all, my thanks go to my sisters, Fawzia, Nahed, Anisa, Asila, and Maryam, for sharing your priorities and concerns on the future of your country. I had the honor of participating in several meetings with you over the course of this week, and I am very impressed by your courage and your dedication and your unwavering determination to advocate for the rights of women and girls in Afghanistan, and also for the long-term stability and prosperity of your beautiful country. This morning, I addressed the United Nations Security Council during its annual open debate on women, peace, and security. The sense of urgency in the chamber about the reversals of gender equality and women's rights around the world is clear, but nowhere in recent times has the reversal of women's rights been so stark as in Afghanistan. The powerful interventions that you have made, my sisters, show how far Afghan women have come, and how they are a strong testimony also to your resistance to accept a rollback on your rights. And for that, we salute you, and we support you, and we stand in solidarity with you. Afghan women have been essential drivers of your country and society, and now we see that you refuse to be invisible, and rightfully so. Supporting women in Afghanistan means holding Taliban to account for their actions, and that human rights monitoring is a crucial issue there, and we need to monitor it. We have heard loud and clear today about what is at stake for women and girls in Afghanistan. Therefore, to the member states present in this room today, I urge you to mobilize to reverse the reversals on women's rights and to stop once and for all the human rights violations facing women and girls in Afghanistan. And before I end, I would like to end actually by quoting the SG's statement this morning to the Security Council. Beginning of quote, "In Afghanistan, the UN is staying and delivering, and we will continue to promote and defend the right of women and girls in all our engagements with the Taliban authorities. We will not stop until girls can go back to school, until women can return to their jobs and participate fully in public life." I thank you all.
Thank you so much, Director Bachus of the UN Women. And we're going to turn now to the interventions. Do we have the Perm rep from France with us virtually?
Yes.
Please go ahead.
You hear me?
Yes.
Well, thank you. I would like to thank the organizers. More than ever, women in Afghanistan are facing daily challenges, and we must not let them down. Women should remain at the core of our response to the situation of Afghanistan. Without them, there is no future possible in Afghanistan. We have set up 5 conditions. The first is the lifting of all obstacles for those who want to leave the country. The second is a total and concrete break of the Taliban with the terrorist groups, in particular Al-Qaeda. Thirdly, free access for humanitarian aid on Afghan territory is essential. Our fourth demand is respect for human rights, especially women's rights and freedom of the media. Finally, the establishment of a representative government is also part of our expectation. We also recall that there can be no impunity for those who violate human rights. An inclusive government means the full and meaningful participation of women. Women of Afghanistan have fought over the past 20 years to gain political rights. There can be no turning back now. Unimpeded humanitarian access also means that the Taliban do not pose any obstacle to the delivery of humanitarian aid to the women and girls. Schools have to be open for girls, health services too. It also means that female aid workers must also be allowed to deliver aid. Resolution 2593, that was supported by France, the UK, and the US, and adopted on August 30, has made clear what the Security Council expects from the Taliban. They have yet to meet those expectations. We must collectively remind them and act accordingly. We will judge the Taliban on actions, not on promises. France has pledged 100 million euro of aid at the Geneva Conference. We will maintain our efforts to avoid an economic and humanitarian collapse. While doing so, we will not forget our core values. Respect for human rights, especially those of women, is not an option, not for the international community, nor for the Taliban. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And before we turn to the permanent rep from Ireland, I would urge that we try to keep our remarks to 2-3 minutes at the most, because we have many, many interventions on the list. Permanent rep from Ireland, please.
Thank you indeed, Madam Chair, Ambassador Milan. I want to say a sincere thanks to our organisers today, my dear colleague Alia, Ambassador O'Neill, the UK, UN Women, and of course the also excellent Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace and Security. Today's discussion and the unvarnished remarks we've just heard from our sisters from Afghanistan have been really difficult to hear. And that's exactly why it's so important that we're here in the room, online. We've come together to hear your testimonies and to listen, but I want to say we need to heed you as well. I want to pay tribute also to Mette Knudsen and her team who are holding the line for Afghan women. Please keep going. Since the tragic event of mid-August when city after city fell to Taliban control, we've seen the steady, deliberate erosion of women from the political, social and economic narrative in Afghanistan. Chair, women's rights, hard won and realised for decades to the benefit of all Afghan people, have been stripped away. Human rights, treated as a gift to be bestowed by men rather than the inalienable right of every woman, man, girl and boy in Afghanistan. But the women of Afghanistan are not standing for it. They continue to speak out bravely, and I sincerely salute them for that. As a member of the Security Council, Ireland's response to the unfolding crisis has been driven by recognising those injustices, calling them out, and seeking to use the tools available to reject them. During Council meetings, we've condemned the exclusion of women from government, exclusion from the negotiation table, exclusion from exercising their right to participate and shape the future of their own country. We've demanded safe, unhindered humanitarian access for all humanitarian workers in response to Taliban's treatment of women humanitarian workers, experts and professionals striving to deliver life-saving, sustaining aid to those who need it most. We've spoken out on gross violations of human rights, reported right across the country, reported by courageous women, such as the leaders on our panel today, and at great risk to themselves and their families. We worked with fellow council members to ensure a prominent reflection of women's rights, of women, peace and security, women humanitarian workers in Resolution 2596, the resolution extending the mandate of UNAMA. After the fall of Kabul, Ireland and Mexico, as co-chairs of the informal expert group, urged the Council to place the utmost priority on the protection and vindication of the rights of Afghan women and girls. But, Madam Chair, and I'm coming to conclusion, I'm painfully aware that our best intentions, our engagement, our well-meant actions have not altered the reality on the ground for women in Afghanistan. It has not diluted the horrors visited on women and girls for the past 3 months, and I am both personally and professionally shamed by that. But as women, Afghanistan women are denied, as the women in Afghanistan are denied their voice, Ireland will continue to use the privilege of its Security Council seat to raise up those whom the Taliban are trying to silence. Chair, Ireland will continue to listen to the women of Afghanistan, to learn from their wisdom and their integrity. We will add our voice to theirs. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ambassador Nason. And now we will turn to the Deputy Permanent Representative from Norway.
Thank you, Chair, and Excellencies and colleagues. Norway is grateful to the organizers for convening this powerful and timely conversation on ensuring international support of Afghan women and girls. Let me also acknowledge the Afghan women leaders here today. We thank you for your contributions, your courage, and your concrete suggestions today. We greatly appreciate that you have shared your reflections and experiences freely and posed challenging questions that we must all reflect on and act on. I'll emphasize 3 short points on how the international community must step up its commitment to support Afghan women and girls. First, the rights of women and girls must be on the agenda of every conversation we will have with the Taliban. We must make clear that their rights are not just talking points, but central to the future of Afghanistan. Afghan women's knowledge and leadership is fundamental to building strong, peaceful, and resilient communities. They are a valuable asset that the Taliban cannot afford to exclude. Second, we can all do more to ensure that Afghan women have direct influence on all decisions that affect their future. Neither the parties nor international actors supporting the political process were previously able to achieve the equal and meaningful participation of women, nor build the necessary foundation for an inclusive political solution. We must now make it a priority to include and listen to women in all bilateral, regional, and international conversations about Afghanistan, and we must ensure we meet and consult all the time with Afghan women when our delegations visit Kabul. Third, we must be clear with the Taliban about its responsibility to respect international humanitarian law and human rights, and that we expect safe and unimpeded access for all humanitarian workers, men and women. We must also include Afghan women in the design and implementation of all humanitarian responses, and with winter drawing near, we have no time to waste. Colleagues, we have all heard the deeply worrying reports about brutal suppression of peaceful protests, limitations on girls' education and women's access to work, as well as the reintroduction of draconian legal practices. Our Afghan sisters speak to us today with great risk, and we cannot let their words and calls for action end with us here. We must commit to find ways to support their direct participation in all discussions and at every opportunity we have. I thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we will turn to the permanent representative from Estonia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thank all Afghan women present here today for their direct words and their courage. Our focus on Afghanistan, including the situation of women and girls, needs to continue. It cannot fade from the center of discussions at the United Nations or the international community at large. The Taliban has made a number of statements regarding respect for human rights, and we ask nothing more than for them to live up to this promise. Human rights are universal, and no culture or religion can be invoked as a justification for human rights violations or abuses. We underline the importance of continued human rights monitoring, including through the UN treaty bodies and special procedures. There needs to be continued OHCHR presence in Afghanistan along with other relevant UN agencies. We welcome the establishment of the UN Special Rapporteur on Afghanistan and look forward to the timely appointment of the mandate holder and the team supporting them. All these mechanisms require resources and access, as well as the support of the countries in the region. We also need to make sure that those engaging with the UN do not face reprisals, and they are means to address the risks faced by them. Estonia has participated in the stabilization and rebuilding of Afghanistan for nearly 2 decades, focusing on improving the situation of women and children. Our cooperation with any Afghanistan leadership will be based upon its willingness to act by the norms and standards of international law, including international human rights law. We underline the importance of full, safe, and unimpeded humanitarian access. We cannot deny the reality that humanitarian assistance will not reach the most vulnerable unless women humanitarian workers can do their work without restrictions and fear. Estonia stands ready to provide humanitarian assistance via international organizations and has already made a contribution to support the ICRC's humanitarian operations in Afghanistan. In our interaction, we need to continue to insist on hearing from and engaging women. This includes all spheres of life, including political. Here I recall that the Security Council, where Estonia, together with Norway, is a co-pen holder on Afghanistan, has jointly noted that for peace to be sustainable in Afghanistan, an inclusive, negotiated political settlement must be reached with the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And now we will turn to the permanent representative from Italy.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Excellencies and colleagues. I would like to thank all the organizers of this important event, but mostly to thank the Afghan women present here, and a warm welcome to them, and thank you very much for your testimony. Of course, the situation of African women and girls in Afghanistan is appalling, as we heard from our Afghan friends here today. We don't need to elaborate further. I just would like to say on the behalf of my country, of my government, that Italy is fully committed to defend your cause, your rights, and we will continue to fight to normalize as much as we can your situation in your country. And as you know, Italy, as the president of the G20, organized many events to raise awareness about the rights of Afghan women and girls. There was a high-level event organized by our foreign ministry during the high-level week, focused particularly on access to education as a key requisite for creating a resilient, inclusive, and peaceful communities in Afghanistan. Then the importance to respect the human rights and fundamental freedoms of Afghan women and girls was one of the shared goals discussed at the Extraordinary Leaders G20 meeting on Afghanistan. At national level, we allocated 150 million for humanitarian assistance in Afghanistan. Also, I would like to recall the collective efforts that contributed to the adoption by the Human Rights Council of the resolution presented by the European Union countries establishing a special rapporteur on the human rights situation in Afghanistan. And we hope that the special rapporteur will become operational soon. We will strongly support its work. We need accountability, as we heard from many sides here today. It's necessary to bind the Taliban leadership to the respect of the fundamental rights and freedom of Afghan women. For this reason, we are fully committed to the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, and we intend to remain at the forefront of the efforts to identify every possible way to continue assisting Afghan women and girls. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now we turn to the Deputy Permanent Representative from Mexico. Oh, there you go.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And we would like to thank the organizers for convening this timely event. And we stand in solidarity with all women and girls in Afghanistan who are demanding immediate action by the international community to ensure the protection and respect of their human rights and fundamental freedoms. We are behind you. We know how brave and how courageous you've been, and we are standing really behind you. Guaranteeing the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women and girls in all their diversity at all levels and in all aspects of public life, including conflict resolution, peace building, and peace processes, is a matter of human rights. Understanding that the participation of all women is a crucial requirement for sustainable peace, Mexico calls for the immediate return of girls and adolescents to school and for the establishment of an inclusive government in Afghanistan. Furthermore, Mexico insists on the importance of having women at the negotiation tables and calls for women to be represented in all delegations of member states, UN agencies, and other stakeholders that interact with the authorities in Afghanistan. We must all lead by example in this regard. The UN system and the Security Council must prioritize and ensure that winterization aid can be delivered. Although these efforts and relief are essential year-round, it is particularly urgent in the upcoming trimester, in which harsh winter conditions disproportionately affect the more vulnerable, including women and girls. As agents of change, local women and grassroots women's organizations must be included in decision-making processes of all humanitarian policies and programs. They must be able to influence and design how the assistance and the protection are provided, as well as the means of delivery. This is really important. As co-chairs of the informal expert group of Women, Peace and Security along with Ireland, and in line with our feminist foreign policy, Mexico will continue to strongly advocate for women and girls in Afghanistan within and beyond the Security Council's actions. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And now we turn to the Deputy Permanent Representative from Turkey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to express our thanks to the organizers of this meeting. Our appreciation also goes to the Afghan women panelists for their insightful remarks today. Despite all obstacles, with the help of the international community, Afghan people made major gains at important costs over the last 2 decades in the field of fundamental rights and freedoms, in particular rights of women and girls. The preservation of these achievements will be first and foremost in the interest of the Afghan nation. Girls' education, return of Afghan women to their jobs, and women's access to essential services are crucial for sustainable peace and stability in Afghanistan. Prolonging existing restrictive measures to an uncertain time is not acceptable. The international community should give the necessary messages to the interim government with one voice and continue to watch their actions, particularly in the area of women's rights. Now more than ever, Afghan people and especially vulnerable groups need our support and solidarity. Women and children stand as one of the most vulnerable groups in the country. We appreciate the international community's timely pledge of more than $1.1 billion humanitarian aid to Afghanistan at the high-level ministerial meeting hosted by the SG on 18th of September. Afghan people on the ground need our assistance now more than ever. Madam Chair, Turkey and Afghanistan have deep-rooted historical and cultural ties. For many years, we have assumed a significant role to support Afghanistan on every front. While we have actively contributed to Afghanistan's security, we have also carried out the most comprehensive development program of our history through countless projects, including many on the empowerment of women and girls. We have built more than 100 schools in Afghanistan, and nearly 130,000 Afghans received education in these schools. We were about to finalize an agreement to build a university where Afghan girls are aimed to get a proper education. However, this could not take place because of the recent developments in the country. However, we will continue to stand by Afghan women and girls in their desire to reach equal rights and opportunities to build a better life. Our endeavors also should include Afghan refugee women who bear the brunt of the latest developments. The international community should support neighboring countries that are already hosting a large number of Afghan refugees and struggling with the socioeconomic impact of migratory flows. With this, I would like to thank you once again for this very timely event.
Thank you. And now we turn to the United States Ambassador.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to our co-hosts for convening this important discussion today, as well as to our panelists for their candor, critical insights, and impact. The United States remains profoundly concerned about the human rights situation of Afghan women and girls. We have heard from our panelists the restrictions on education, access to work, and freedom of movement, the exclusion of women from government structures and other governance and security processes, as well as reports of increased instances of gender-based violence, including forced marriage, are also alarming. The women and girls of Afghanistan, just like all Afghans, deserve to have their human rights and fundamental freedoms respected. It's for that very reason that human rights, including the full and meaningful participation of women and girls in all aspects of Afghan society, were a key focus of the U.S. delegation's discussions in recent meetings with senior Taliban representatives in Doha on October 9 and 10. We continue to engage in relentless diplomacy to support the people of Afghanistan, including its women and girls. We have made clear to Taliban representatives that women's ability to access all levels of education is vital. And we will condemn any abuses against women the Taliban commits, which would violate public commitments by Taliban leaders to seek peace and reconciliation for all Afghans. In our discussion with the Taliban, we have also emphasized the freedom of movement for women humanitarian staff and women beneficiaries is of utmost importance to the continued delivery of humanitarian assistance in Afghanistan. As the single largest donor of humanitarian assistance to Afghanistan, the United States is committed to helping our partners on the ground provide life-saving support. Our aid, including the nearly $64 million in new humanitarian assistance we announced in September, we hope will help address the protection concerns of women, children, and minorities, as well as help more children, including girls, go back to school. Permitting both female and male aid workers to operate freely is critical to the success of this work. The UN Security Council has set out our unified expectations for a united, inclusive, and representative government and the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women in Afghanistan. The credibility and support that the Taliban seeks from the international community will depend on the behavior it exhibits. We are watching closely to see that the progress made for women and girls over the past 20 years is sustained. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And now we will turn to the European Union Ambassador for Gender and Diversity.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to the organizers for this event today. Women's and girls' rights have been particularly challenged and threatened in Afghanistan, and the latest developments given us great cause for great concern. We've made it clear on many occasions that future EU development assistance to Afghanistan will depend on the respect for the international legal framework and for norms on human rights, including women's and girls' rights. With this, the EU has taken a very principled position. We are determined and committed to continue to support the women and girls of Afghanistan from this principled perspective, meaning sticking to our values and beliefs. We are putting gender equality first. The reports from the UN on the rapidly deteriorating economic and humanitarian situation in Afghanistan are increasingly alarming. The EU's response to this deteriorated situation is to scale up humanitarian plus aid support directly to the Afghan people through multilateral organizations and local operating partners without the involvement of the Taliban regime. We are of the opinion that the UN system is a logical conduit for this, given its long-standing presence in the country and established systems in providing for basic services in many sectors. But of course, we must make sure that this is done while listening to you, the ladies who are here today, making sure that whatever operational guidelines and funding mechanisms are developed, such as a specific trust fund, it is not only established quickly, but also through consultations with the key beneficiaries, that is, with you. What follows here in my speech are 2 paragraphs about the violence, threats, and restrictions women in Afghanistan are faced with. But this was already described and presented much better by Fawzia and Anisa than I can. So I would like to turn now to something that was put on the table so emphatically by Nahid Farid, a monitoring mechanism, a verification mechanism, a place where information is brought together to help us determine our future actions. The monitoring of the situation for women and girls in Afghanistan is a priority for us. I can tell you that since I arrived in Brussels in July of this year, I've been having, since the middle of August, many meetings with Afghan representatives and civil society to reflect on this. using, among other things, the framework of the EU Task Force on Women, Peace and Security. And yes, Anissa, I'm aware of this commitment. Meanwhile, an EU-led resolution was adopted in Geneva appointing a special rapporteur for Afghanistan. It made me aware that we need, first of all, to ensure that now what is needed most is a structured dialogue with Afghan women, both inside Afghanistan and with all of you who were forced to leave the country. To conclude, the empowerment and the realization of the rights of Afghan women and girls must be an integral part of the political solution and is crucial to ensuring your protection. Those who hold power and authority on the ground must create and support an enabling environment and structures for all women to have a full, equal, and meaningful participation in the process. And to Asila, I would say, I heard you, and after today, I'm even more convinced that we, the EU, that I must do everything I can to make sure that you, the women of Afghanistan, can bring to the table wider societal issues and additional networks, and that only this way the legitimacy and ownership of the process can be assured. Involving only men means engaging only half of the population. I'm looking forward to our meeting tomorrow to continue discussing how we can move forward together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now to the permanent representative of Sweden.
Ambassador Verver and the co-host, a big thank you for convening this meeting. But more than anything else, I'd like to thank and express solidarity with our brave Afghan sisters present with us here today. You should never, ever need to make the choice between standing up for your rights or hide and focus for your survival. I can assure you that for us, you're not invisible. And I think this is precisely what we need to do today, to focus our conversation on what women leaders say and how we can ensure your voices are translated into policies and action. And you can count on us, or you count on us as the international community for support and solidarity, and we must show you that that is not in vain. Gender equality and women's and girls' human rights are at the heart of Swedish engagements in Afghanistan. Sweden has particularly supported women's education and healthcare. Our support continues through the UN and partners like the Swedish Committee for Afghanistan, with presence in Afghanistan for almost 40 years, and with more than 6,000 employees, almost all of them Afghans, many women. And as we look ahead in today's serious situation, let me stress 3 brief points. First, we must tirelessly and relentlessly demanding that the Taliban uphold human rights for everyone. We need to use all entry points and leverages we have to push for everything from education to full and equal representation. And this also includes our support to the newly appointed Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in Afghanistan. I also think it is important that member states can give concrete example on how to combine Islamic governance and gender equality, as was emphasized by Ambassador Alia. Second, we need to focus on issues of participation, protection and prevention simultaneously, so that we can promote women's full, equal and meaningful participation while also addressing reprisals. A key focus for Sweden is to strengthen capacity and provide flexible funding to women civil society organizations in Afghanistan. Finally, Principal humanitarian life-saving support is necessary to address the acute humanitarian needs of the Afghan people. But it's not enough to address the risk of total collapse of basic services, as Mette Knudsen rightly said. We need to seek synergies and bridges between humanitarian and development assistance, where women are both on the delivery and receiving end of the response. Gender responsiveness is key to this and requires a UN that stays, delivers, and continue to put pressure on the Taliban, as was also emphasized by ED Sima. And all this requires our continued and proactive backing, politically, morally, and financially, and I thank you.
Thank you very much. And now the permanent representative from Brazil.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Let me begin by thanking the organizers for this timely event, which has provided an opportunity to hear testimony directly from Afghan women. In light of what we have heard here today, we clearly see that it is crucial to renew the unified call of the international community for the protection and promotion of human rights, especially of the ones that seem most affected, women and girls. Brazil welcomes the rapid engagement of the United Nations in responding to the current crisis, especially the efforts of UNAMA, UN Women and UNICEF to try to ensure that the progress of the last 10 years in terms of access to education and participation in public life are not lost. In the Human Rights Council, Brazil supported the adoption of the resolution that created a mandate for a special rapporteur dedicated to the situation of human rights in Afghanistan. The seriousness of the situation on the ground justifies, nonetheless, more ambitious follow-up measures by the international community, as requested here today. In the framework of the Regional Conference on Women in Latin America and the Caribbean, Brazil signed a declaration urging for the protection of the human rights of women and girls in Afghanistan. Now, although we all agree that the best scenario would be a safe Afghanistan for all Afghans to live in peace, Brazil is actively working to support and protect Afghan civilians seeking asylum and refuge. In a spirit of solidarity and cooperation, the Brazilian government decided to authorize, early in September, the granting of humanitarian visas to people affected who need to leave the country at this difficult moment. Special attention has been given and will continue to be given to requests from women, children, the elderly, people with disabilities and their family groups. This week, Brazil welcomed a group of 26 people, 10 Afghan magistrates, 7 of which women and 3 men, as well as their families, who obtained humanitarian visas through this fast-track scheme. They were rescued by a joint operation involving national and international class associations. 400 other individuals and family groups are expected to join the magistrates and their families and travel to Brazil with humanitarian visas. Next year, as an elected member of the Security Council, Brazil will pay close attention to the situation of civilians on the ground, especially of women and girls. We must ensure respect for human rights and humanitarian law. Brazil will work towards a constructive engagement of the international community in support of an inclusive, democratic Afghan political process with the full participation of women, one that promotes the cessation of hostilities, stability, and national reconciliation. Brazil remains firmly committed to the human rights of women and children in Afghanistan, and it is open to examine other modalities of humanitarian cooperation. I thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we turn to the Deputy Permanent Representative from the Afghan Mission to the UN.
Thank you. Thank you. Is it working? Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the floor, Madam Chair. Let me first present my apology that the permanent representative was not able to join us in this meeting today because the Security Council meeting is going on in another room, and he was delivering statement on the Women, Peace and Security meeting. Thanks at the outset, allow me to thank the permanent mission of the United Kingdom, the permanent mission of Qatar, and the permanent mission of Canada, UN Women, and the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace and Security for organizing this very important meeting today. I also want to thank all participants and speakers who spoke before me and their unanimous support to Afghanistan, particularly the Afghan women. Let me welcome the respected delegation of Afghanistan women, Madam Fawzia Koofi, Madam Nahid Farid, the former members of the parliament, Anissa Shahid, a famous journalist of my country, and colleagues, my dear colleague, Asila Wardak, acting head of the United Nations Department of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs at MUFA, and also welcome Maryam Safi to New York, particularly participating in this meeting today. I wish they were participating in the Security Council meeting on women, peace and security, which is going on right now in the next door. Madam Chair, 20 years ago, the Security Council acknowledged that women and girls experience conflict differently than men, and they can play an important role in prevention and resolution of conflict and peace building. Since the adoption of the Security Council Resolution 1325, almost 2 decades ago, women in Afghanistan have made significant progress. Let me share a little of that progress with you in the presence in this room today. From female literacy rate almost doubled from 17 to 30 in 2018. The number of girls in primary schools increased from a few thousand in 2000 to 2.5 million in 2018. The number of girls in higher education increased from around 5,000 in 2000 to around 90,000 in 2018. The percentage of female teachers increased from 27% in 2007 to 36% in 2018. The number of seats held by women in parliament rose from 3% in 1990 to 28% in 2017, which Her Excellency Fawzia Koofi and Nahid Farid was among the members of the parliaments. More importantly, women were on the driving seat, making decisions and adopting policies before August 15 this year. But today, sadly, this year, women, peace and security debate comes in a new dark chapter for millions of Afghan women and girls who are about to lose the 2 decades of progress and empowerment they achieved with the support of the international community. Madam Chair, Afghanistan seems to be on risk once again today. There is a risk of returning of Afghanistan back to the situation before 2000, which I hope it will not happen. So what we can do together to reverse this unfortunate trend? Today, I would like to underline a couple of the concrete recommendations in this regard. First, we must remain steadfast and united on our position to safeguard the progress made by women and girls in the past 20 years and protect those gains. No compromise should be alternative to the principles we all agreed upon in different formats, particularly the Security Council resolutions. In most conflict situations, women and girls are disproportionately affected by the negative impact, and it is therefore essential that the international community is deliberate in targeting vulnerable women and ensure humanitarian assistance reach to them and in value Afghan women at decision-making level. Finally, I wish to thank the international community for the generous and humanitarian contribution and unwavering support to the Afghan women in Afghanistan. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, sir. And now we turn to the Deputy Permanent Representative of South Africa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And we wish to thank, firstly, the organizers of this meeting. And we wish to congratulate the various briefers from Afghanistan who gave us such moving testimonies this afternoon. In view of time, I will make only a few brief remarks. Firstly, we believe that sustainable peace in Afghanistan is dependent on broad consensus where women and girls fully participate in any peace-building process. Second, it is important that the international community responds adequately to assist the Afghan people to chart a way out of violence, war, and displacement to that of peace, harmony, and prosperity. In all this, the concerns of women and girls should be paramount in all planning. Third, we hope that progress can be made towards all-inclusive talks between the various stakeholders in Afghanistan. South Africa also wishes to reiterate that all parties must respect their obligations under international humanitarian and international human rights law, including ensuring the protection of the most vulnerable of Afghan society, namely women and children, particularly from sexual and gender-based violence, as well as people living with disabilities. And lastly, we underscore that there can be no substitute for inclusive political dialogue and diplomatic engagement aimed at conflict resolution. In this regard, we call on all parties involved to commit to a lasting, constructive, and peaceful resolution of the situation in Afghanistan. I thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we turn to the Deputy Permanent Representative of Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to join others in expressing my appreciation to the co-hosts for convening this timely meeting. For over 20 years, Japan has been supporting women in Afghanistan by prioritizing their protection, empowerment, and full and meaningful participation in the peace process through UN funds and programs, as well as through bilateral support implemented by JICA. The training and deployment of female police officers in Afghanistan is but one example of our assistance in supporting and promoting gender equality in the nation. The current extremely concerning situation should be described as human security crisis, compromising the survival, livelihood, and dignity of most vulnerable people, including women and girls. Joining the international effort to cope with the daunting situation, Japan has newly committed $65 million in the areas such as shelter, health, water and sanitation, food, agriculture, and education. This brings our total support to Afghanistan to $200 million for this year. We will ensure gender responsiveness of our humanitarian assistance to secure the protection and empower women and girls. As G7 leaders made it clear, women and girls in Afghanistan deserve to live in dignity, peace, and security. Their political, economic, and social achievement during the last 2 decades cannot be reversed. Japan will monitor closely the actions of the Taliban, actions that Taliban will take in relation to human rights, and participate actively in the international efforts, including those led by UN Women and by the UN system as a whole. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have the Deputy Permanent Representative of Indonesia with us virtually? No?
Can you hear me, Madam Chair?
Oh, yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, allow me to thank the UK, Qatar, Canada, UN Women, and the Georgetown Institute for WPS to organize this important event. Similar to other colleagues, we are also deeply concerned about the widespread violence and discrimination against women and girls in Afghanistan. I would like to highlight three fundamental points on this matter. First, ensuring an inclusive Afghan government. This is a matter of principle to respect human rights, including women and girls. This is also essential in preventing Afghanistan to revert to a breeding and training ground for terrorist activities. Therefore, we need to put a special emphasis on the importance of international community to work together in this regard. We also need to ensure the immediate and unimpeded delivery of humanitarian aid to the people of Afghanistan. Excuse me. Second, ensuring the safety and well-being of the people in Afghanistan. All women should be allowed to return to work immediately, and all girls should be allowed to go back to school. Aside from its financial pledge at the ministerial meeting on the humanitarian assistance in Afghanistan last September, Indonesia is committed to providing capacity building programs for Afghanistan in the coming 3 years. We will put a special emphasis on women participation in all these programs. Third, strengthening women representation in Afghanistan. Indonesia has been consistently pushing for the empowerment of women and girls in Afghanistan, especially through Afghanistan-Indonesia Women's Solidarity Network. This network was established to fulfill our commitment to support the full, equal, and meaningful women participation in peace process. We believe that Afghan women are agents of peace at all levels, especially at the grassroots level. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, in the future, Indonesia envisions that women and girls in Afghanistan can participate effectively and meaningfully in the society. The implementation of Women, Peace and Security Agenda is indeed a transformative force to lead us into more inclusive Afghan government. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And our last intervention is from the International Committee of the Red Cross and its representative. No.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Afghanistan is, in the last week, has seen massive changes, but one thing is clear. The Afghan people cannot pay the price for these changes. Humanitarian needs in the country are massive and growing. The looming collapse of basic services, health, water, and education can potentially impact millions of people. For more than 30 years, the ICRC has operated in Afghanistan. In our work, the role of women has been essential. To this day, we have female staff members working in the field of health and rehabilitation, and we need them. The Afghan people need them. In our work, we make sure that women in Afghanistan have access to our medical and rehabilitation services. When a woman comes to our health centers needing care, we make sure that we have also female medical and rehabilitation staff on our team to provide that care. We need this practice to continue. We have to ask to the international community on this issue. Keep humanitarian aid and assistance unconditional. This ensures that we continue to deliver based on needs to people of diverse backgrounds and genders and according to humanitarian principles. 2, We urge the international community to continue investing in areas of high need, such as access to healthcare and other basic services. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our session has now come to a close, and our work to ensure international cooperation in support of Afghan women and girls really must continue and go forward with greater urgency. We have heard so many reasons why. We have heard ways in which we must go forward, and we thank our sisters from Afghanistan for their extraordinary testimony before us today, and their pleas to us to do all that we can and must do through the international community's efforts and levers to do just that. So we thank them for all of their statements, which I'm sure were very difficult to make in many ways, given what they're going through. And we thank those who brought us together today, the United Kingdom, Qatar, UN Women, and for all of the interventions and work of the member states. Thank you all.